Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm your host, Jordan Jones. The regular season has come to an end as Purdue football capped off a strong season with an emphatic bucket game victory. Meanwhile, Purdue basketball continues to climb up the rankings as Mike Bobinski can sit back and smile at his athletic department's success as a whole this year. Lots to talk about today. We'll recap that bucket victory. We'll preview a couple important games this week. But first, make sure follow the show on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. And if you could, tell a friend who doesn't listen yet, send them here. We'll be making content all year long, talking Purdue athletics. So get them all here. Let's keep growing this thing a little bit. But to dive right into what we're all here for, Purdue 44, Indiana 7. The bucket returns to West Lafayette for the first time since 2018. This is the biggest margin of victory in the Purdue-Indiana series since the 62-10 victory in Joe Tiller's final game back in 2008 at Ross-Ade. Easy cover of the 15-point spread for Purdue. When we had our guest Derek Decker on last week, I thought he was a little bit ambitious when he was telling us that it was going to be a 45-6 game. Guess he wasn't so wrong after all, now was he? This win caps off an excellent regular season for Purdue. 8-4 is very, very good. That's a record that Purdue hasn't had often. The last time Purdue won 8 games in the regular season is 2006. And I went back and kind of looked at that season. Certainly not the most impressive 8-win season. All their losses were blowouts, a lot of close wins against teams that probably should have been big wins. Not a real strong non-conference slate. So, this isn't something that's happened often. To see a better, a 9-win season, that was back in 2003. Only one 10-win season in school history. So, to look at what Purdue did this year, I think you have to be pretty impressed, and you have to be really happy with this. Purdue needed a bounce-back season really badly. That's something I talked about here on the show, and for those who have been listening, you'll remember that we talked about how Purdue really needed to get back on the right track. Jeff Brom brought in a lot of enthusiasm in 2017 and in 2018 with big wins and getting to bowl games at 6-6 both years. And the next step wasn't taken. You took a step back. 2019 was an aberration of injuries. You can really just throw that one out, I think. And then 2020 was the COVID year. Nothing was normal. We saw all sorts of weird stuff happen last year across the sport that I don't think was necessarily indicative of how things, how reality was at a lot of schools. I just don't think last year was the accurate representation of where Purdue's program was at. I don't think that last year did justice to what Jeff Brom had done. So he needed this year to bounce back, and he certainly got it. 8-4 is fantastic. One huge thing I want to point out that came from this season and that was on clear display on Saturday, Ross-Ade Stadium attendance was huge. And that is a very, very big point for Purdue athletics. For those of you who remember the 2012 firing of Danny Hope, well, a huge part of that was the poor attendance at Ross-Ade Stadium. Fans were completely checked out. You saw the north end zone pretty empty at most games. The student section was hit or miss. The corners of the south end zones weren't even close. There was still the south end zone seats there. Those were usually kind of empty. So, seeing Ross-Ade Stadium really full, 3 straight sellouts to end the season, very good attendance for Illinois and Oregon State. Minnesota was a rain game. That's really big. You can tell the enthusiasm is really in a good spot for Purdue's program right now. Things really aligned well for Purdue when you look at all the pieces that came together for an 8-4 season to happen. For one, and obviously the biggest point of this, the defensive staff that came in with Brad Lambert, with Ron English, with Mark Hagan, that's been fantastic. The improved play on defense was far more than any Purdue fan could have possibly asked for, in my opinion. I don't think you could have asked for anything else. I just don't know what more Purdue could have done. And Mark Hagan not being a Broyles Award finalist is rather ridiculous in my mind. I still don't understand that, but so be it. It's been huge on defense. You've had 2 elite players, David Bell and George Karlaftis, obviously are both going to go to the NFL, it seems like. They both certainly deserve to go to the NFL at this point. I think Karlaftis will be a first rounder. I don't know about Bell, but he's got a place there somewhere, no doubt about it. And then Aiden O'Connell has played at a level that Purdue hasn't seen at quarterback since Kyle Orton. That's a long time ago. That's 17 years ago. But that's what it all those pieces, your defensive staff, your stars, your quarterback became a star, that came together, and an 8-4 season was your result. And one point that I don't think has been discussed enough anywhere, Jeff Brom got back to throwing the ball downfield, making big plays in the pass game this year. And that was certainly a factor in the benching of Jack Plummer, the promotion of Aiden O'Connell to the starting quarterback role after the Illinois game. Because in 2019 and 2020, Purdue didn't make enough big plays down the field. And that was a large contributor, especially in 2020. The defense was so bad, though, too. I mean, there were a lot of issues both years, but in this season here, and especially the second half, Purdue threw the ball downfield, and that's what Jeff Brom needs. This is... You're comparing apples to oranges to some degree when you look at Purdue against the rest of the Big Ten West, because Purdue is so philosophically different from the rest of them. Iowa and Wisconsin and Northwestern, and really Illinois with what Bielema wants to do there, all smash-mouth teams. Minnesota, Nebraska are going to do more of the RPO stuff. Purdue's the only downfield passing attack in the West Division. Purdue has to embrace that and be good at that if they are going to emerge on the West side. So that's been so huge. The receiver play has been very good. Obviously, Bell is elite. He could be the Bolitnikoff Award winner. We'll find out here next week, I think. But Milton Wright, Jackson Anthrop, TJ Sheffield, Brock Thompson have all made an impact this year. Payne Durham and Garrett Miller had nice years at tight end as well. That's a big position in this offense. But it all comes back to last year at the end of Purdue's 2-4 season when things weren't great. And Mike Babinski talked about, and I think the quote was, I want the coach I hired back. Jeff Brom he'd gotten away from some of the trickeration. He'd gotten away from the big play offense. This year he was able to get back to it, and that's been a massive part in Purdue's success. The flip part of this win, obviously, is the impact that it has on Indiana's program. And this was an absolute nightmare of a season for Tom Allen and company down in Bloomington. I can't say, my first thought when I was thinking of points for this, it's not that too much stock was put into one season, because IU did have a nice year in 2019. They went 8-4 in the regular season, should have won their bowl game against Tennessee. They didn't, but they should have. And in 2020, you had the dream season for them. I think they were 6-1 before they lost to Ole Miss in their bowl game after they had taken the Big Ten logos off their uniforms and helmets in protest of Ohio State being named the Big Ten East champion. That clearly aged well with an 0-9 Big Ten season. But that 2020 season was only possible because a 50-50 call went their way in the first game. That's reality. This year, injuries really hurt them. You heard Derek talk about it last week. They got banged up as all can be. The defense was really hurt. You had no stability at quarterback. You had to play Grant Gremmel, a walk-on against Purdue, who just didn't look like he was supposed to be out there. Donovan McCulley was ineffective all year. But regardless, a 2-10 season with wins coming against Idaho and a 2-point win over Western Kentucky, that's pretty crazy how poor of a season that was for them. And you could tell, weeks ago, but IU had already quit on this season. And now, I think they have 10 players in the transfer portal now. They've just today alone on Monday, Miles Marshall, one of their better receivers, hopped in the portal. A couple other names did. They fired the offensive coordinator, Nick Sheridan. Tom Allen's taken a pay cut to go pay his new offensive coordinator more. It's not well down there. And this is an emphatic exclamation point to a season where Purdue took back all momentum that Indiana had won in terms of the in-state rivalry between the two. Last year, there was no bucket game. Make no mistake, Purdue would not have won that game. Purdue had no momentum at that point. And I think on defense, Purdue would kind of quit as well. That momentum has all shifted back to Purdue, where it was after the 2018 season when Purdue beat Ohio State, Purdue beat that ranked Iowa team, Purdue beat IU. Purdue had all the momentum then. And now it's back in Purdue's hands. And it's up to you to maintain that. The ball is in Jeff Brom's court now. The ball is in the Purdue program's court. We'll see how this affects recruiting. Obviously that's where the momentum lies, is in recruiting in the state of Indiana. But you'll see it in the transfer portal. You'll see it in everything. You go down to Bloomington next year, and if you lose the bucket, you've really lost all that momentum back, depending on how the years go, obviously. But you have a great opportunity here, if you're Purdue, to continue to build on the momentum and keep elevating yourself as the better of the two Big Ten programs in the state. A few takeaways just about the team. I don't know when the all Big Ten teams are announced, but Aiden O'Connell should be the second team all Big Ten quarterback. Obviously, CJ Stroud's going to be your first guy on the first team. I don't know who would be second team over O'Connell unless, the voters decide to give Cade McNamara all sorts of credit for the Ohio State win. But O'Connell, 16 touchdowns to 0 picks since the Wisconsin game, over 70% completion in that time frame. That's elite. That is elite stuff. If Purdue can get him back next year, and I don't know what the outlook is there, he's got the COVID year. It's his if he wants it. I would be absolutely stunned if Purdue didn't want to give it to him. You're looking at a really nice outlook for 2022 if you have your starting quarterback back. That's something Purdue hasn't had too often. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that George Karlaftis and David Bell played their final games in Ross-Ade, almost certainly. They both took part in the senior day ceremony, even though they are both juniors. That should tell you all you need to know. Purdue fans should be incredibly grateful. Those guys represent the school very, very well. They played incredibly hard for 3 years. They were never off the field issues. They were never discipline issues on the field. Those guys were as absolutely great as you could have asked for when you got them. And they were big recruiting wins at the time, but the impact they both had, absolutely massive. And of course, it was the final games for a lot of other seniors as well. Some guys that come to mind: Jackson Anthrop, Jalen Alexander, Diedrich Mackey, Xander Horvath, plenty of others as well. Obviously, O'Connell is the biggest name that you think of as a extra COVID year option. There could be more. There certainly could be more. You never know. And the only downside is you have to be back at 85 scholarships for next year. Purdue has a pretty big recruiting class coming in. I know it will want to keep some scholarships open for the transfer portal. So, you can only take so many people. But Aiden O'Connell is certainly the one you would take over anyone else. As I'm recording this as well, and I wanted to touch on this to begin with, I just got a text that it sounds like LSU is really pushing hard to get Brian Kelly. The coaching carousel is nuts right now. Yesterday, Lincoln Riley ditched on Oklahoma to go to USC. Florida's hired a coach. Washington's about to hire Kalen DeBoer. It's nuts out there. It is crazy. And I don't know that there are any open jobs that I think Brom would be a great fit at. I just don't. I don't know, between his personality of being a little more reserved and just how close of a family guy he is. I don't know what a great other fit would be for him, but it is probably time for Purdue to get that contract extension done. It goes through 2025. Usually you want 4 or 5 years left on that deal, at least. You don't want it to get inside that. So I think you'll hear those negotiations going on here. Maybe that'll be before, maybe that'll be after a bowl game. But I'd be surprised if there's no extension before next season starts. The biggest priority in this is Brom to get a larger assistant coaching pool. That is how you continue to build your program. Purdue's in a different spot because you have Brian Brom as the offensive coordinator, obviously Jeff's brother, and your defensive staff is pretty veteran. I don't know that those guys are going to jump to head coaching jobs if they were to come their way. I don't know what those guys would leave for, but at some point you're going to need to hire better assistants, and you're going to need to pay these guys more to retain them for the impressive performances they've delivered already. You got to get those guys paid. That's where you're going to see the most money go to, I think. I don't think Jeff Brom's going to, get a boatload more money on his salary. You never know, but you need to tack some years onto this. You have a very, very good coach at a job that hasn't always had a lot of great coaches. So it's time for Purdue to get that done, and that way they can sit back and watch this carousel unfold without having to worry too much about their guy. Moving on to basketball, I was in Mackey Arena on Friday to watch Purdue absolutely annihilate Omaha, 97-40. It's not even worth discussing. Omaha looked like a high school team. I felt bad for them. They really shouldn't be a D1 team, but they are. Gotta love the money of college athletics sometimes at the small levels. Great teams don't take games off. Purdue didn't show up to play. Helps prove that Purdue is a great team. Purdue's up to number 2 in the rankings this week. Not a huge surprise that Duke jumped Purdue. Duke was number 5. They go up to number 1 after beating Gonzaga. Duke has some good wins. They beat Kentucky. They beat Gonzaga. Obviously, they have media support that other schools don't. They're a brand name. Certainly, everyone would love for Purdue to be number 1 for the first time in program history, but that's not going to happen yet. Now, Purdue's got a pair of good games this week. Tuesday at 7:30, they take on Florida State. That is obviously the Big Ten ACC Challenge. And Friday, Big Ten play gets tipped off 9 p.m. against Iowa. Starting off with that Florida State game, it's a program Purdue is familiar with. Matt Painter has faced off with them a few times here recently. The 2018 Big Ten ACC Challenge down there, and the 2019, what was that? Was that the Emerald Coast Classic against Florida State in the championship game, I think? That sounds right. I don't even remember what that tournament was, but it's a program that's given Purdue some trouble. They are very, very long. Leonard Hamilton has really built a great program there, but I don't know that this is one of his stronger teams. They've lost a lot of players to the NBA in the past 2 years. They lost to Florida earlier on this year, week and a half ago, and that game wasn't all that close. They squeaked by Tulane and Boston. Their last game out, Boston University. Florida State needed a tip-in at the buzzer to win that one. They've got 3 key players out for this game. Their starting point guard and 2 bigger guys. That takes away some excitement from this. I think it's their starting guard is out to attend to a family member's funeral. Very unfortunate there. Couple injuries as well. With Purdue and Duke at 1 and 2, the conversation is cranked back up that Purdue wishes they were playing Duke. You should. It would have been a lot of fun, that's for sure. Mackey would have been on one for that. It's still going to be rocking tomorrow night. Should be an awesome atmosphere there. And then on Friday, Big Ten play starts. It's been this way since 2017 now, where you have these 2 early Big Ten games that can either really help you, that can really hurt you in the standings. It depends on what your team is built of. This Purdue team, with all the returnees and the continuity, they should be ready for this. They should be thrilled that they get these 2 Big Ten games. Younger teams with less continuity, not so exciting. I look back to the 2018-19 season, when Purdue won the Big Ten. Their first 2 Big Ten games weren't great. They barely beat Maryland at Mackey. That was a game no-gel Eastern blocked Anthony Cowan's shot at the buzzer, I think. And then they got run off the court up at Michigan on a Saturday afternoon. So that was a team that was replacing 4 starters, and you saw those growing pains for a little bit. But this Purdue team should be ready, and they are taking on a team that is replacing a lot of starters. The Iowa Hawkeyes had their best year in ages last year, but gone is Luka Garza, gone is Joe Wieskamp, gone is CJ Frederick. That was the bulk of their team there. To this point, they haven't played anyone. Now, I'm recording this an hour and a half before Iowa takes on Virginia. That may be the most contrasting styles matchup you'll ever see, with Virginia's pack line defense and slow offense, and Iowa's completely opposite style. They pounded 6 mid-majors in a row to start the season. Keegan Murray's been really good. He kind of burst onto the scene a bit last year, but he's completely developing this year. Been really good. You still have Jordan Bohannon around. You still have both the McCaffrey kids. Yes, Jordan Bohannon, 6th year at Iowa. He has been around forever. And in that time, they have never really played much defense. Purdue's going to score quite a bit on them. Iowa can score. They can put up points in bunches. They may stretch Purdue's defense a good amount. They like to play a 5-out style, but in reality, Purdue should win both these games. I'm not saying they will, but they'll be favored pretty significantly in both, I would figure. So that's what you're looking at with basketball this week. Pair of opportunities to continue to bolster what you've started. That's about all you can say at this point. It is obviously big because you don't always have tons of chances to play against tournament teams. I think Florida State will be a tournament team. Iowa, I don't know, but the Big Ten isn't looking great. So it's a big week for the Big Ten with the challenge here. You have opportunities on a national stage to pick up some quality wins. The ACC isn't great either. I'll add that. But the Big Ten winning the challenge would be very good for the league. Starts off tonight, and then Tuesday and Wednesday are the big days for that. Couple of miscellaneous thoughts before we get to questions from Twitter. Over the weekend, Brady Allen and Joe Strickland, Purdue's two top commits in the 2022 class, squared off in the 3A state title game in Indiana. Brady Allen gets the win. Him and Gibson Southern took down Brebeuf. A big comeback there. Allen had 5 touchdowns, I think. He is going to be really good. I am very excited to see what he can do. He's an absolute gunslinger. Strickland's good as well. He has put up huge numbers all year. He's a defensive end on a dominant team, so he's played a lot of first halves this year. But both these guys are going to be very significant. Always cool to see them play each other. And we will have a lot more on football recruiting here in a few weeks. National Signing Day coming up. Might do a Signing Day special. Might just, tack it on at the end of a basketball-heavy podcast. We'll see. Some major credit is due to Purdue Volleyball. They are the number 6 team in America going into the NCAA tournament. I think I saw that starts on Thursday. And then Katie Gerald's and Purdue women's basketball took down a ranked Florida State team. That is Katie's first big-time win at Purdue. That was Purdue's first win over a ranked team in a few years. Mike Babinski's department has had a very big fall. Football, and by fall, I mean the season fall, not drop-off fall. Football was very good. Volleyball, great. Soccer, best season in forever. And now you're going into winter with national rankings in basketball and wrestling. Women's basketball is off to a good start. Very good fall for Mike Babinski and his athletic department. The bowl game, I had a question about this as well. Still a lot of speculation. It seems like New York, Phoenix, Vegas, Nashville are all possibilities. I do think this team deserves to go to a nice spot. They deserve to not go to New York, in my opinion. I think Purdue is in a good situation because, the fan base doesn't have bowl fatigue the way some do. So I think Purdue is in line to travel pretty well. And that's always what the bowl games want. They want to sell as many tickets as they can. So I think that's going to help Purdue, but really just don't want Purdue to go to New York. And then last thought before a couple questions. Ready or not, it's transfer portal time. I am sure Purdue is going to lose a few players here in the next few weeks. That's not abnormal. Chances are it's not going to be a big contributor, and chances are it's not going to be someone who was due to have big contributions next year. And maybe Purdue will start, getting portal commitments here. I don't know. It's a never-ending saga, especially once this season ends. I can't remember what the date is this year. Is it May 1st that athletes need to be committed to their new school by to be eligible for the fall? So it's all going to get going here. And who knows what's going to happen. So I'll keep track of things. We'll spit off names on the podcast, and we'll see where Purdue goes with the portal. 2 questions here from Twitter, and kind of related. Number 1, a guy or two that got minimal playing time to buy stock in. Talking about Purdue football here. On offense, I'm going to go with a pair of receivers, Mershawn Rice and Abdur-Rahman Yassin. Can they stay healthy is your big thing. They both had season-ending injuries. God, I can't remember if Rice played in a Minnesota game or not, or Yassin for that matter. But you got to keep them healthy. They are going to be really good receivers from what I've seen if they're healthy. That's been a big problem for Rice especially. And then on defense, I'll go defensive tackle, DeMar J. Lewis, and corner Sanusi Kane. I think Kane is really in line to come in and play corner next year. Dedrick Mackey is out. Chris Jefferson will be out as well. So you'll have Trice coming back from injury. You'll have Jamari Brown. And then I think Sanusi Kane slots in pretty well there as that nickelback. Recruits that I'm excited about. As I said, we'll do some more of this here in a few weeks. But Jimmy Liston, the center that Purdue has committed from the Chicago Catholic League, he just won a state title, 4-year starter for his school there. And then my excitement for Brady Allen is pretty high. I think he's going to put together a nice career. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for spending some time with me. Next week, 2 basketball games to discuss, Florida State and Iowa. We'll break those down. We'll preview the next 2. And we will have a bowl destination to talk about for Purdue football. Be sure, follow me on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Tell that friend. And until next time, enjoy your week.